Clara sat on the edge of her worn-out couch, staring at the calendar on the wall. Each day she had missed rent feeling heavier than the last, pressing on her chest like an invisible weight that refused to lift. The apartment around her was small, cozy in some ways but cluttered with reminders of responsibilities she could barely keep up with. Bills stacked neatly yet accusingly on the corner of the kitchen counter. The hum of the refrigerator blending with the distant noise of the city that never seemed to sleep. A constant reminder that the world was moving forward while she felt stuck, suspended in a cloud of worry and exhaustion. She ran her fingers through her hair, tugging at strands she didn't even realize she was pulling, her mind racing through every possible consequence of her delay. Imagining phone calls from her landlord filled with anger. Imagining doors slammed in her face. Imagining eviction notices stamped in bold letters that would strip her of the small sanctuary she had managed to carve out for herself in this bustling city. Clara's stomach churned as she thought about the work she had taken on to make ends meet. Freelance gigs that paid little and demanded much. Shifts that left her drained but never quite covering what she needed. Emails unanswered. Invoices unpaid. And yet somehow the rent had slipped from her grasp despite her best efforts. A bitter reminder that life often moved faster than one's ability to keep up. That the fragile balance of responsibility and survival could topple in a single missed day. She glanced at the clock, the minute hand inching forward like a silent judge marking her failures, and sighed, letting herself slump into the couch cushions, feeling the tension in her shoulders unwind just enough to let her fatigue sink in. A combination of mental exhaustion and emotional weight that made her eyelids heavy. Though sleep offered little comfort, restless thoughts weaving through her mind in endless loops of worry, shame, and the faint, stubborn hope that something might change before disaster arrived. Just as she leaned back and closed her eyes, trying to ignore the mounting dread, there was a soft, deliberate knock on the door, a sound that sliced through the silence of the apartment and made her heart leap into her throat, a sharp note of anticipation mingling with anxiety because she had not expected anyone, certainly not now, and she wasn't prepared to face the reality she feared. Her hand trembled slightly as she rose to answer, brushing off her sweat-sticky palms on her worn jeans, and walked toward the door, each step echoing in the quiet apartment like a drumbeat of her nervous heartbeat, the familiar hallway feeling strangely foreign under the weight of impending confrontation. Clara opened the door slowly, half expecting to see anger or disappointment etched across a face she had avoided thinking about, but instead she saw him, Elias, her landlord, standing there with an envelope in one hand, a calm, almost gentle smile on his face, a look that didn't carry the sharp edge of judgment she had been rehearsing in her mind. He looked at her with eyes that seemed to understand, as though he knew the storm inside her and yet was not threatened by it, as though he had faced struggles himself and recognized the trembling human spirit that could barely keep itself together under pressure. Clara blinked, caught off guard by the softness in his gaze, by the absence of the anger she had been bracing for, by the strange warmth that seemed to radiate from him without words, and she felt a strange flutter in her chest, a mix of relief and confusion that made her stomach tighten and her throat dry. "Clara," he said, his voice low and steady, carrying a quiet authority but not harshness, "I think we need to talk, but not about money." The words hung in the air like an unexpected gift, disorienting her, making her heart beat faster, making her mind scramble to find the right response, to decide whether to retreat, to apologize, or to simply stare in disbelief. She hesitated, feeling the weight of the envelope in his hand, the unspoken promise that whatever it contained was not the confrontation she had feared, that perhaps there was a different path, a way to navigate this difficult moment without shame or conflict, a way she had not imagined. Elias shifted slightly, the movement casual yet deliberate, giving her space but also conveying a quiet determination, a reassurance that he was not here to punish but perhaps to understand, to bridge the distance that had grown between landlord and tenant, between two lives that had crossed paths in mundane circumstances, yet could now intersect in unexpected, meaningful ways. Clara swallowed hard, finally finding her voice, shaky and uncertain, and said, I wasn't expecting," but he interrupted gently, shaking his head. "You don't have to explain. I've been there, and I know it's not always easy." His words struck a chord deep within her, cutting through layers of embarrassment and fear, reminding her that behind the roles people played, landlord, tenant, stranger, there were human beings who understood hardship, who had felt the same tight knot of worry that now constricted her chest. She motioned him inside, hesitant but curious, a mixture of vulnerability and relief flowing through her as he stepped over the threshold. The envelope still in his hand but now transformed into a symbol of something else, something uncertain yet oddly comforting. They moved to the small kitchen, the space filled with the faint scent of coffee and the lingering aroma of last night's dinner, the familiar clutter of her life suddenly seeming less oppressive in his presence, less a monument to failure and more a canvas for connection. Clara poured 2 cups of tea, her hands still slightly trembling, and placed them on the table, watching as Elias accepted one with a nod of thanks, his eyes meeting hers with steady attentiveness, inviting her to breathe, to speak, to acknowledge the fear and hope tangled inside her. Conversation began cautiously, tentative words exchanged like fragile bridges being built across a river of tension, and Clara found herself opening up in ways she hadn't expected, sharing small pieces of her struggle, the pressure of bills, the uncertainty of work, the constant balancing act of trying to keep life afloat while feeling adrift, each confession met with a patient nod or a quiet, thoughtful smile that made her feel seen in a way that had been rare in recent months. Elias shared fragments of his own life, stories of times when he had faltered, moments when he had needed help, and Clara listened, fascinated by the ease with which he conveyed empathy without pity, a natural warmth that made the room feel lighter, the oppressive weight of overdue rent momentarily lifting as she realized that she was not facing this alone. Time passed almost unnoticed, the city's noise outside fading into a soft background hum, the envelope on the counter no longer a symbol of dread but a quiet, mysterious promise, a reminder that sometimes life presented opportunities for grace when one least expected it. As Elias prepared to leave, he placed a gentle hand on the edge of the table, looking at Clara with a smile that carried encouragement and something more unspoken, something tender and cautious, and said softly, "We'll find a way through this together." Clara's heart skipped a beat, an unfamiliar warmth spreading through her chest, a flutter of hope mingling with curiosity and something else she couldn't quite name. A feeling that perhaps life had just offered her a chance at something unexpected, something transformative, something that could turn the weight of worry into the lightness of possibility. She watched him go, the door closing softly behind him, and felt a strange calm settle over her. A sense that the storm of her anxiety had shifted, that a new chapter was quietly beginning, one in which kindness, understanding, and human connection could reshape the narrative she had been telling herself for too long. Sitting back down, Clara allowed herself a small smile, the envelope still waiting, the city lights outside twinkling like tiny beacons of hope, and she realized that sometimes, the heaviest burdens could be softened not by money or solution, but by the simple act of someone seeing you, understanding you, and offering a gentle hand when you had almost forgotten how to hope. The night stretched on, quiet and comforting, and Clara felt a new pulse of life within her, a spark of anticipation that maybe, just maybe, the unexpected could turn into something beautiful, a thread connecting 2 lives in ways neither had foreseen, a moment that would linger in her heart long after the worries of rent faded into memory, leaving only the warmth of human compassion and the fragile, thrilling possibility of connection. After that first unexpected visit, Clara found herself thinking about Elias more than she cared to admit, his calm presence lingering in her mind like a quiet melody she could not shake, and when he knocked on her door again a few days later, her chest tightened with a mix of anticipation and nervousness, as if every encounter carried the weight of unspoken possibilities. He entered with the same gentle ease, carrying no envelope this time, only a kind smile and a subtle warmth that immediately made her apartment feel less oppressive, as though his presence alone could shift the atmosphere, making clutter and worry seem lighter. Clara invited him to sit, and they shared tea again, the steam rising between them like a bridge connecting 2 people who were just beginning to understand each other, 2 lives intersecting in small, profound ways. Conversation flowed more naturally this time. She found herself laughing at his dry sense of humor, the way he could tell a story without exaggeration yet still make it feel vivid, as though the ordinary events of life held a hidden poetry he could effortlessly uncover. He asked about her work, not with prying curiosity but with genuine interest, listening intently as she described freelance projects, deadlines that seemed impossible, the constant balancing act of trying to make her rent and bills while maintaining her sanity, and Clara felt a strange relief in sharing her struggles, as though simply speaking them aloud to someone who understood could lift a fraction of the burden she carried alone for so long. Elias shared moments of his own life, carefully chosen fragments of his past that hinted at challenges, heartbreak, and lessons learned, Stories told without complaint but with honesty, revealing a depth that made Kyla feel both comforted and intrigued, a gentle tug at her curiosity, drawing her closer to someone who had been a figure of authority but was now becoming something far more personal. The room seemed to shrink around them in the best way, the world outside fading into the background, replaced by the soft rhythm of conversation and the occasional laughter that slipped between sentences, a sound that lingered in the air like sunlight through the blinds, warming corners of her heart she hadn't realized were cold. Kyla found herself noticing little things she hadn't before, the way his eyes softened when he listened, the faint crease of concern on his forehead when she spoke of challenges, the careful attention in his gestures that suggested patience and thoughtfulness, as though every movement was meant to convey care without overwhelming her. She caught herself leaning in slightly when he spoke, drawn by the sincerity in his tone, the quiet magnetism of someone who could listen without judgment, who could sit with your fears and hopes in equal measure and make both feel valid. For his part, Elias seemed equally engaged, tilting his head, asking questions that encouraged her to elaborate, occasionally sharing a story that reflected her own experiences, creating a mirrored connection that made her feel less isolated, less like she was battling her anxieties alone. Hours passed unnoticed. The sun outside dipped lower, the shadows stretching across the small apartment, but neither of them seemed to notice, caught up in a rare, unspoken intimacy that grew from shared words and quiet understanding, a bond forming not through grand gestures but through the small, consistent acts of attention, empathy, and presence. At one point, Elias gestured toward the envelope she had seen the first time he visited, still sitting on the counter, and casually mentioned that it would wait, that there was no urgency, that perhaps the contents weren't as important as the conversation itself, a simple acknowledgement that left her feeling seen and respected, that her humanity mattered more than financial obligation, a realization that brought an unexpected lump to her throat. They spoke of dreams too, faint, tentative desires that felt dangerous to articulate yet impossible to suppress. Kyla admitted she had always wanted a life filled with creativity, connection, a sense of purpose beyond survival, and Elias nodded as though he understood completely, revealing glimpses of his own quiet ambitions and regrets, a tapestry of human longing woven into casual words. Something unspoken lingered in the pauses, a quiet electricity neither dared to name aloud, a pull toward each other that was measured, gentle, respectful, yet undeniably present, filling the spaces between sentences with possibility, a soft tension that made the ordinary room feel like the center of a universe that had opened just for them. Kyla noticed how easy it was to talk to him, how she could share fears and fleeting hopes without fear of judgment, how even a laugh or a shared look carried a weight of significance, a subtle intimacy that was thrilling and comforting at the same time, like standing on the edge of a precipice with someone you trusted implicitly. Elias listened with patience and care, responding thoughtfully, never interrupting, never rushing, giving Kyla space to articulate the parts of herself she usually hid, revealing that connection could be built slowly, tenderly, without force, and that even in ordinary moments, profound bonds could form if people were willing to show up fully. As evening crept closer, the room dimmed under the soft glow of a single lamp, the world outside fading further into night, and yet neither seemed ready to break the fragile cocoon they had created, both aware that the day's distractions had vanished, leaving only the quiet intimacy of two people sharing time and understanding in a way that felt rare, almost sacred. Kyla found herself smiling more freely than she had in weeks, feeling her heart lift with each story, each empathetic nod, each gentle glance, recognizing the rarity of someone who could meet her vulnerability with kindness rather than judgment, who could make her worries feel lighter simply by listening, simply by existing alongside her in that moment. When Elias finally rose to leave, it was with the same gentle deliberation as before, a soft hand brushing hers as he gestured toward the door, a fleeting touch that carried warmth without pressure, a momentary spark that lingered in her awareness long after the door closed behind him. Kyla sat back down, her tea cooling on the table, the envelope still waiting, but her mind no longer consumed by dread or anxiety. Instead, it swirled with the memory of his voice, his presence, the subtle gravity of their conversation, the way he had turned an ordinary day into something memorable, meaningful, and profoundly human. She realized that a simple act of understanding, a moment of connection, could transform fear into hope, anxiety into curiosity, loneliness into companionship, and that perhaps the unexpected kindness of one person could shift the trajectory of days, weeks, even the way one viewed life itself. That night, as she lay in bed replaying the conversation, she felt a strange mix of emotions: gratitude, curiosity, excitement, and a quiet longing that was both exhilarating and unsettling. A realization that her life had shifted imperceptibly yet irrevocably because of someone who had chosen to see her, to listen, and to share himself without pretense. Clara drifted to sleep with the soft echo of his voice lingering in her mind, a whisper of possibility that the days ahead might hold not just survival, but connection, warmth, and perhaps the beginnings of something tender, something gentle, and something real that neither time nor circumstance could easily diminish. The envelope remained unopened, a symbol of patience and mystery, but the true gift had already been given. The knowledge that she was not alone, that human kindness existed even in the small, unexpected corners of life, and that perhaps, just perhaps, Elias was someone she could trust, someone who could walk beside her through the difficulties, someone who could transform ordinary moments into extraordinary ones simply through presence, empathy, and understanding, and that realization alone left her heart fluttering with anticipation, hope, and a gentle thrill of possibilities yet to come. Days passed after their last encounter, yet Clara found herself thinking about Elias constantly, his calm voice, the way he listened with patience, the warmth in his eyes that seemed to see her in ways no one else had, and when he appeared at her door one rainy afternoon, carrying 2 umbrellas with a small teasing smile, her heart fluttered as if it had been waiting for him to arrive, a rhythm she hadn't realized she had missed so deeply, a mixture of nervous anticipation and quiet joy making her fingers tingle as she reached for the door. They stepped out together, the rain falling softly around them, drenching the streets in a silvery glow, and as they walked side by side to a nearby cafe, their umbrellas barely touching, Clara felt the world around them dissolve into a blur. The ordinary cityscape fading into the background while the intimacy of shared space drew them closer in ways words could barely describe, a silent electricity humming between them with every step. Conversation flowed easily, laughter spilling between them like sunlight breaking through clouds, and for the first time in weeks, Clara felt completely present, free from the anxiety that had haunted her, free to simply exist in the warmth of another's company without fear, without pretense. Elias shared anecdotes of his childhood, moments of mischief and small triumphs, tales that revealed the layers beneath his composed exterior, and Clara listened intently, feeling a connection that went beyond simple familiarity, a sense of recognition that perhaps they had found in each other, a rare kind of understanding, a resonance of hearts attuned to similar beats. She told him about fleeting dreams she had never voiced aloud, ambitions she had tucked away for practicality, moments of vulnerability she had hidden even from herself, and he met each confession with gentle encouragement, asking questions not out of judgment but curiosity, a genuine desire to understand her fully, and Clara felt herself opening in ways she hadn't dared before, the bond between them growing deeper with each exchanged word. The rain continued to fall, the streets glistening under the dim glow of lamplight, and with every step they took, Clara noticed the subtle ways Elias paid attention, the tilt of his head when listening, the way his eyes lingered on her with quiet admiration, the small gestures that spoke volumes about his care, his patience, his unspoken regard, and she felt a flutter of warmth in her chest, a thrilling mixture of attraction and emotional intimacy that left her both excited and breathless. They reached the cafe, a small cozy place tucked between 2 larger buildings, the smell of coffee and baked goods enveloping them as they entered, and found a quiet corner where they could sit, the world outside fading further into a soft, rainy blur, leaving only the soft glow of hanging lights, the rich aroma of espresso, and the comforting presence of each other. Over steaming cups, their conversation deepened, touching on fears, past disappointments, fleeting moments of happiness, and the small triumphs that often go unnoticed in daily life, each word weaving a tapestry of mutual understanding, the kind of bond that forms not through grand gestures but through sustained attention, patience, and empathy. Clara laughed freely, her voice mingling with the ambient chatter of the cafe, feeling lighter than she had in months, the tension in her shoulders easing with every shared glance and soft smile, while Elias's presence remained steady, grounding, a safe harbor in the storm of her emotions, a constant that made her heart feel both calm and thrillingly alive at once. Outside, rain continued to streak the windows, and every so often Elias would catch her gaze, a fleeting spark of something unspoken flickering between them, a silent acknowledgement of the connection that had grown beyond casual conversation into something tender, intimate, yet carefully restrained, A slow-burning warmth neither dared to name aloud but both felt acutely. The walk back was quieter, filled with companionable silence, punctuated only by the occasional laughter at some trivial observation, but in the quiet, Clara felt the magnetic pull of Elias beside her, a gentle awareness that proximity alone could carry weight, that the shared experience of simple moments, walking in the rain, holding umbrellas, speaking without pretense, could nurture a bond far more profound than grand declarations or dramatic gestures. She noticed herself adjusting her pace to match his, subtly leaning into the space where their shoulders brushed, a soft thrill running through her as he responded with a slight, deliberate closeness that felt intentional yet respectful, a dance of intimacy forming without words, the quiet electricity of mutual attraction simmering beneath the surface, tender and restrained, yet undeniably present. When they arrived back at her apartment building, the rain had softened to a gentle drizzle, the streets shimmering with reflections of lamplight, and Clara felt a bittersweet pang, a reluctance for the moment to end, a hope that this connection, fragile yet profound, could continue to grow. Elias paused at her door, their umbrellas touching briefly, the proximity sending a shiver through her, and he spoke softly, "I hope we can do this again soon." A simple statement loaded with unspoken meaning, a hint of anticipation that mirrored her own longing, a delicate acknowledgement of the bond forming between them. She smiled, heart racing, words failing her as she nodded, realizing that the moments with him had shifted something inside her, that her days felt brighter, her burdens lighter, her heart quietly full in ways it hadn't been in a long time. Inside, she set down her damp coat and watched him leave, the door closing with a soft click that felt like both an ending and a promise, a delicate hinge between what had happened and what might yet come, leaving her in the quiet of her apartment, alone yet not lonely, filled with the lingering warmth of shared moments and the thrilling uncertainty of burgeoning affection. That night, as she reflected on the day, Clara realized that the connection she had begun to feel with Elias was something rare, a gentle intimacy that could grow slowly, a tender pull that made ordinary moments extraordinary, and a subtle unspoken attraction that both scared and exhilarated her, making her heart race in a way that was new, unfamiliar, yet undeniably welcome. She thought of his smile, his quiet patience, the way he had listened without judgment, and a longing settled in her chest, soft but persistent, a desire not just for his presence but for the emotional closeness that had begun to bloom between them, a craving for a shared understanding that went beyond words, beyond circumstances, beyond the ordinary routines of life. Even as sleep beckoned, she found herself replaying the walk, the cafe, the rain, and the small, intimate gestures, feeling her heart swell with anticipation and curiosity, recognizing that human connection, when genuine, could transform even the simplest days into moments that lingered in memory, moments that held the potential to grow into something profound, tender, and life-changing. She drifted to sleep with a quiet smile, the rhythm of rain outside mirroring the gentle beat of her heart, a soft, lingering hope that the days ahead might hold more walks, more conversations, more laughter, and the delicate, thrilling possibility of something deeper with Elias, someone who had turned ordinary moments into a space where her heart could breathe, where her vulnerabilities could be met with kindness, and where the future, though uncertain, suddenly felt alive with gentle promise. The morning sun streamed softly through Clara's small apartment window, casting warm golden light across the cluttered kitchen, where the envelope that had been a quiet presence for days sat patiently on the counter, waiting to reveal its contents. Yet somehow, after all the time spent with Elias, the anticipation was no longer wrapped in dread but in a delicate mixture of curiosity, excitement, and the gentle flutter of hope she hadn't felt in months. And as she approached it, her hands trembled slightly, a reflection of the emotional journey she had been on, from anxiety and fear to connection and quiet longing, and she wondered what message might be inside, whether it would change everything or simply confirm the new rhythm of trust and intimacy that had begun to form between her and Elias, a rhythm that had grown from simple tea and conversation into something tender, almost sacred in its unfolding. She took a deep breath, feeling the soft weight of the morning around her, the distant sounds of the city muted by the protective cocoon of her apartment, and carefully opened the envelope, expecting a formal notice, a demand, or even disappointment, but instead, she found a single note, written in neat, thoughtful handwriting, words chosen not to admonish but to comfort, a quiet expression of understanding and support that made her chest tighten with emotion as she read. "I want to help you. Not for rent, but because you deserve kindness. and beneath it was a small voucher covering essentials she had worried about, a practical gesture that carried far more weight than money alone, a symbol of care, attention, and the unspoken acknowledgement that her struggles were seen, her efforts appreciated, and her worth recognized beyond the transactional relationship that had initially defined their connection. Clara's eyes filled with tears, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief and warmth of being genuinely understood, and she felt a wave of gratitude so strong it made her knees weak as she realized that Elias had gone beyond the expected boundaries of landlord and tenant, showing her a depth of empathy and humanity that touched her in ways she hadn't anticipated, opening her heart to emotions she had kept locked away, a delicate mix of admiration, tenderness, and the stirring of something more intimate that both frightened and thrilled her. She looked up as she heard a soft knock at her door, heart skipping a beat, and there he stood, Elias, his presence calm, composed, yet undeniably gentle, a smile playing on his lips, eyes meeting hers with that same warmth that had first drawn her attention and held it ever since, a silent acknowledgement that he understood the moment, the emotions swirling between them and the subtle, unspoken possibility that life could shift in beautiful, unexpected ways if they allowed themselves to simply be present with each other. Words felt unnecessary, the space between them filled with a quiet intimacy, a shared understanding that had been carefully nurtured over days of conversation, laughter, vulnerability, and subtle, meaningful gestures, and as he stepped inside, she felt the familiar flutter in her chest, the soft anticipation that had been growing steadily, now fully awakened, a delicate tension that was neither overwhelming nor forced but natural, flowing from connection, respect, and mutual care. A bond formed. Slowly yet profoundly, the kind of emotional intimacy that could transform ordinary routines into cherished moments, making her apartment feel like a sanctuary where trust, warmth, and gentle attraction could coexist in harmony. Elias placed a hand lightly on the counter near the envelope, his gesture casual yet deliberate, an unspoken reassurance that she had handled herself well, that the challenges she faced were valid, and that support could come in forms more meaningful than strict obligation, a lesson in human kindness that left Clara feeling simultaneously humbled and elated, realizing that her perspective on help, trust, and connection had shifted irrevocably. She invited him to sit, the two of them sharing quiet conversation over tea once more, but this time, the dialogue carried a deeper resonance, a nuanced exploration of hopes, dreams, vulnerabilities, and the subtle acknowledgement of feelings neither had yet named aloud, yet both recognized, a dance of emotional intimacy that was tender, respectful, and profoundly moving, each word, pause, and smile weaving a tapestry of connection that neither could ignore. Clara spoke of her fears for the future, the lingering anxiety that had haunted her since the missed rent, and Elias listened with a patience and attention that made her feel validated, cherished even, as if her experiences and emotions mattered in their own right, not just as a backdrop to practical concerns, and she felt a quiet thrill in the realization that someone could see her completely, understand her fully, and respond with care and affection rather than judgment or indifference. Outside, the sunlight shifted, casting soft patterns across the kitchen floor, and the quiet hum of the city faded to a distant murmur as they continued to talk, the boundaries of their initial roles dissolving in the warmth of shared vulnerability, laughter, and gentle teasing, each moment building upon the last, drawing them closer in a rhythm of connection that was both thrilling and comforting, familiar and entirely new. Clara noticed the subtle ways Elias engaged her, how his eyes lingered just a moment longer, the slight tilt of his head when listening intently, the soft gestures that conveyed understanding without overwhelming, the careful calibration of proximity that made her heart race in anticipation yet never feel unsafe, and she realized that the emotional intimacy between them had become a delicate, unspoken dance, one that balanced closeness with respect, desire with patience, and affection with gentleness, creating a bond that was uniquely their own. Hours passed unnoticed as they shared stories, small jokes, reflections on life, fleeting confessions, and quiet silences filled with meaning, and Clara felt a fullness of heart she hadn't known she could experience, a mixture of comfort, longing, excitement, and peace that coexisted without conflict, each emotion amplifying the others in a harmonious blend of human connection, subtle attraction, and emotional resonance. When it came time for Elias to leave, he did so with the same gentle deliberation that had defined their interactions, a lingering glance, a soft smile, and a subtle touch of his hand near hers, leaving her apartment feeling both empty and profoundly enriched, the quiet after his departure vibrating with the memory of shared moments, the promise of understanding, and the delicate thrill of mutual affection that had grown steadily over the days. Clara sat down, the envelope now a symbol not just of practical help but of human compassion, connection, and the possibility of love, her heart filled with gratitude and anticipation, understanding that her world had shifted in ways she hadn't imagined, that kindness could transform fear into hope, anxiety into curiosity, loneliness into companionship, and that the delicate bond she had formed with Elias held the potential to grow into something tender, beautiful, and lasting, a testament to the power of empathy, presence, and emotional intimacy. That night, as she reflected on the events of the day, she realized that life had offered her a gift she hadn't anticipated, a lesson in trust, vulnerability, and the quiet magic of connection, and she drifted to sleep with a soft, contented smile, her heart fluttering with the possibility of what could come next, the envelope resting nearby as a reminder that the smallest gestures, the simplest acts of understanding, and the willingness to open oneself to another could transform ordinary life into something extraordinary, leaving her with a sense of hope, warmth, and the gentle promise of love unfolding. In its own time,